Hello, I'm Danielle Ofri, editor of Bellevue Literary Review. With each issue of BLR, we have the pleasure and the challenge of finding artwork for the cover. We're always looking for cover art representative of the vibrant conversation sparked by the fiction, nonfiction, and poetry we publish. While the tones of these works vary, there's something uplifting about seeing so many facets, so many shared experiences reflected on the page. When we came across Alexander Gorlizki's Flights of Fancy, with its buoyant elephant and backdrop of interconnected blooms, we knew we'd found the cover for issue 44. His artistic style was so intriguing that we wanted to learn more about his creative process. So earlier this summer, I hopped on the subway to Dumbo, Brooklyn, to pay a visit to Alexander's studio.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you.
Alexander Gorlizki is a London-born, Brooklyn-based artist who early on became enchanted by the centuries-old tradition of Indian miniature painting. Alexander's works are all about sustaining conversations between artisans, mediums, and cultures. He's a self-described visual magpie, and nowhere is this more apparent than on his studio wall, spangled with drawings and assorted found material. So tell me about this wall.
It combines my interest in drawing and in collecting and in breaking down the separations between different approaches to making. And then it's kind of combined with kind of objects I made years and years ago, drawings that I'll do on magazines, and then works I've produced with Riaz, who's up here.
Working now in collaboration with master miniature painter Riaz Uddin, Alexander maintains an atelier in Jaipur, India.
So it's really about kind of ways of thinking, and about, when you look at it, you start making relationships, or I start making relationships between an object here that could go here. So it really extends this idea of connectivity and making relationships.
So this is kind of your way of thinking, this wall?
Yeah, I think if there's anything that was to kind of unearth the contents of my mind, it would probably be this.
Is this a receipt from something?
That is a receipt for, that was from Peshawar. I brought some blocks of soap. I just love the way, that's what came with it, and he wanted my name.
It's interesting how art turns up in so many unusual places if you know where to look.
Yeah, I was very influenced by mail art as a student, and this idea that you could kind of make drawings and send them, and you could find receipts or snippets from a magazine and incorporate them. So in a way, collage, even though the works themselves aren't necessarily collaged, it's kind of a metaphor of kind of adding layers and layers from different sources.
I think this is very much how our minds work. When you read a good book, it doesn't necessarily go in a straight line. A good book works like our mind, back and forth, in and out. I go to Ian McEwan book, 800 pages of going in and out of the way we think and feel. Connectivity is right. Each object echoes one to the next. Every inch of Alexander's studio is a visual feast. Even his cabinet of pigments and his collection of tools seemed like artworks. I had to know how each piece got its start. So I'm curious, when you start, do you start with an image, an idea, a design, a thought, a process, a feeling? Where do you start?
I think of drawing very much kind of in the way that I think of play, that it's both something quite open-ended, it's also very serious in a way. And sometimes what I find with drawing is that I can start off with a very clear idea, but then it kind of turns round where I'm kind of following the drawing, following the hand. And then it comes back to me driving it. So the process is quite open-ended. I'll start off with a piece of paper, start sketching, and then when I see things, I'm kind of responding to them often. So now, over the years, I've kind of developed quite a large archive of imagery. So, for example, let's say this work has its origins in this. There might be quite a traditional elephant. In this case, it's floating on a piece of rock with under a palm tree. So what you have is, in the end, is a kind of a narrative, but it's quite, I think of the viewer as the meaning maker. So the idea, is that when you look at it, your interpretation would be very different to how someone else would look at it. It's really not didactic, and I suppose I think of that in the way that poems are often written. It's kind of suggests images, but then the way they're interpreted is very personal.
And where do you keep track of all your images?
Well, everything comes back to drawing for me. Just whether I'm working with two-dimensional images or three-dimensional images, or designs for wallpaper or clothing. So this, for example, some people won't know what this is. It's a Rolodex.
Yeah.
And historically they were used to kind of keep contacts, phone
Yeah.
numbers and so on.
Yeah.
Or, so, I have hundreds of notebooks, drawing books and so on. And what I realized was I'd never look back at them. So I started kind of going back to old drawings, old notebooks, and would transcribe some of the images. So this becomes a kind of an archive of imagery from works that I may have made years and years ago, but then they might kind of make an appearance in this. So it's really kind of a series of conversations.
These conversations that inform Alexander's work don't just occur across time, they also occur around the world, between Pakistan, Jaipur, London, and New York.
Can you tell us a bit more about your collaborative work?
Much of this is collaborative. So in this case, for example, this is kind of a recent motorbike helmet. This is a design I worked on years and years ago on an artwork, and then I've become kind of interested in taking miniature painting outside of the picture frame and applying it to objects. So, for example, in this case, this would start off as a drawing, and then I work with a woodcarver also in Jaipur, who basically carves according to the drawings, and then it goes to the studio in Jaipur, and there are now about 7 or 8, sometimes more, artists working in this atelier. So the colors and the patterns are decided at my end, but then the works go back and forth. So all of these objects, for example, have been through a number of different people's hands. So these plates, for example, they're hand painted. They're not printed. They're not dishwasher proof. So you'll see the same images that you saw in those objects appear here. It's kind of a cast of characters. And the same with the ties. Again, these are all hand painted. It's really kind of an ecology of, there's a brush maker, the pigment dealers, the paper makers.
So, Bellevue Literary Review is a literary magazine about health, illness, and healing. And, I think a lot about art with that. I wonder if that at all resonates for the process that you do.
I'd say in a kind of, maybe in an indirect way. I think of drawing as the key to everything, to world peace and mental health. In the sense that you kind of develop a kind of a relationship in drawing that's both kind of quite personal, it's creative, and I think you kind of find meaning in what you're doing in that way, which I think is a kind of is a part of making oneself whole, where you connect different aspects of your being.
With each issue of Bellevue Literary Review, we strive to connect people of all experiences through storytelling and poetry. And with each cover, we hope to illuminate and enrich the literary offerings within. So thank you to Alexander Gorlizki, to our editors, writers, artists, and to you, our readers.